Something I forgot to mention was putting your rig into the proper folders. So we've got the rig, and it's currently been made where the layer we had selected. That's under layers right here. So we need to move this into a proper layer. So with the cat rig selected, I'm just going to go in and hit the new layer or right click, and you can tell it to create a layer. So I can just go layer, and it's going to be the Morgan rig layer, which already exists. So you might want to remove that Morgan rig layer if you just put it into a new layer. You could have also just moved them. Morgan underscore rig. Probably best with a capital M there as well. And of course, we want that inside of the Morgan folder. So if we turn on and off the Morgan folder, we turn on and off everything. Okay. So there's our rig, so there's the rig and there is the model. So I'm going to right click on the Morgan model so you can get to the properties here this way as well. And you can, these are layer properties though, as opposed to doing the object properties, which is really what we want. So we want to go, right click, select all the objects and object properties. And I'm going to turn off the freeze, and we don't want the see-through on. Um, we want that off. Looks like it was a mixed within things I was doing prior. Um, we want to be able to make sure everything's visible, unless, we don't need all those parts again. But we don't need all these parts, so I'm just going to make sure that these things are hidden off, hide selection, and, go and get rid of these again because I goofed. Now we want to skin the character and have the hair in there and the teeth and the eyes eventually, but you want to get started with this. Now, same with the kind of the setup, we're going to leave all of the clothing to last. Now, again, we can't do the boots last because we're going to need them. We're going to, have to have them in there to be able to see what we're working on, but we're going to skin one object at a time here to get us going. And then we're going to, sort of copy things over. So bring that rig back up again. I'm just going to go see through as well, still on this, just to be able to see what I'm doing. And to be able to skin the character, you need to add the skin modifier. So over to your modifiers, if you've got unwraps on everything, make sure you collapse the stack down to an editable poly, and everything should be collapsed down. We don't need those anymore. They just get collapsed into the vertex data. Okay, so they're not gone. You didn't get rid of them. Collapse them. Don't delete the modifier. Collapse the object down to an editable poly. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to get into skinning and add those animation modifiers. So we're going to drop in the skin modifier. Now the skin modifier allows us to be able to bind vertices to bones. Now the size of these bones, the shape of these bones is absolutely 100% irrelevant. They could be teapots strung together. It wouldn't matter because you're not binding to the object that you see. You're binding to what's called the transform matrix, which is the position, rotation, scale of the object, okay? You are not binding up to anything else. Easiest way to add bones, personally, is to manually do it. I prefer to do them one at a time for various reasons. You can go in and add them all, on just hit add, and then you could go in. We know we want everything that's called base human, but we don't want everything called base human because there are some objects like these foot pads. We don't want to, like the controls at the feet, we don't want these added, so I tend to do things, on an easier sort of level. We want to be in edit envelopes so you can see them, but I'm going to right click and I'm going to say add bones. So that add bones option is the one you want. It's not in here anywhere. It's only in the right click, add bones. And I'm going to start at the pelvis, and it's going to give you these big ass ugly um, envelopes. We really don't care about those. You're going to see why in a bit. So I want to hit display and say show no envelopes to get rid of them. And I'm going to get rid of those and then just start adding the rest of the bones in. When you add them, you can see this little bone sort of icon comes in here. And we're going to go ahead and just, add them all the way up the neck and the head and then down the arms, down the thumb and the fingers, and you can see why I didn't want to bother getting into rigging the fingers and everything. You can if you like, but it is, definitely a pain in the butt to add everything. So this isn't so bad. There's so few bones in this simple rig we've got going on here. It's not really going to take long at all. So click, 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 right click to end. So you're out of that tool. And now we can go from here. I'm not even sure we need this one. This may not even be really necessary. We don't need that box. We just don't need it. So let's remove this one, okay? So we added the one for this big chunk up here. It's not necessary because we've got all these spine joints. So you can go down and you can remove a bone that's selected and just delete it, right? Or there's options when you right click again in here that you're gonna find. Now once you've done that, what we want to do is we want to run a voxel skin weight. Voxel skin weighting is a way of sort of trying to take a best guess, a pre-guess at getting the skin weights right. So there's voxel and there's heat map. We're going to try with the voxel. So hit the dot, dot, dot beside it. Go with the defaults and hit apply. And once that's run, you'll notice when you select bones now, you're going to notice they come up in all these little pretty colors. So red defines that it is 100% select, affected by that bone. Now you cannot, it is impossible to skin a character without having poses on the character and animation on it because you can't see what's going on. If you're trying to paint weights on a character and trying to set up the skin, and you don't have poses, you're not doing anything at all useful, okay? So we're just going to get out of the envelope subobject mode with the one on the keyboard, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I keep saying it, right? I don't know why I have a key on that. I'm just going to delete that, probably by mistake. It was just on that mesh. And I'm going to enter animate mode, and I want to slide along to frame 10. Grab my rig here, and under the parameters, I've got an animation layer on here. Make sure that animation layer's on there, or else you won't get animation. And what I'm going to do is create a ROM test. Now, ROM test is range of motion test. So what you want to do is you want to take your foot through a range, your feet and your legs and whatever else through ranges of motion to be able to get it set up correctly. Now, we're really not worried about major animation. We're not doing that in this class, but what we're going to do is we're going to sort of take this character into some crazy, poses that, we can utilize. Now, again, that might be, getting in our way, having this, the mesh, so I can just freeze it right here. Okay, and freeze everything. I'm just going to grab everything up the spine, for instance, and I'm going to go ahead and I don't think I can. Oh, I can't rotate those. Sorry, I have to do it on this object. I'm just going to rotate that over something crazy, move it. And you can see the character starting to do some pretty ugly stuff. Maybe take the body and do some funky things to it. And again, we'll just take the arms, maybe the hand, and we'll go ahead. I'm just going to go into local, and we're just going to bend that, and we're just going to take, create sort of some just ridiculous poses that kind of carry the character into some extreme situations. And with those extreme situations, you can then see what's going on in the rig. You can see whether or not your skinning is actually achieving what you expect it to achieve. Without it, you don't know. So there is my, first ROM test. You can see the boots are getting left behind. I'm going to go along to the next frame. And I'm going to go ahead and drop in some other pose that takes my model into some other extremes. So I can copy keys just the same way as you copy anything else in Max. Just shift drag. I'm going to throw the legs out to the side in this case. So I'm just going to copy these keys over to reset it. And then I'm just going to throw them out so I can see what happens in the crotch area. Okay, because it is going to do some, crazy things. I'm going to maybe, let's just bring this, reset this back up, and then just forward, bend the character over, and whatnot. And sometimes just working in screen mode or clicking that little box in the middle there. I find going into screen mode easier. I don't accidentally hit anything else. So this is going to give us an idea of what we're after. Okay, you can see the teeth are getting left behind even. Okay, so come up with 5 or 6 extreme poses: forward, backwards, bent over, twisted around, that take the character into somewhat extreme sort of settings, so that you know that things are working or not. So once we've done that, we can now actually go about scrubbing animation to be able to see whether or not our skin's working. So we want to make sure we turn N off, okay, turn off the animation mode, go back to our mesh, okay, and in this case, we can now you could even hide the rig. So I'm just going to go ahead and just hide the rig off. And we can go along and we can see what's happening. I'm going to turn off the see-through mode with Alt-X, and I'm going to enter back into the sub-object skin level, and we can start playing around with some of these and seeing what's happened. So you'll see that the character is really starting to stretch its spots. Now, one of the things, it's not bad, it's not horrendous. We could actually get some poses out of this, but you can see the chest area is getting stretched in weird ways. I'm actually kind of surprised at how well the crotch area is working and whatnot, because it tends to be a really bad area to skin. And the joints are soft. And this is a limitation of linear skin weights, which is what all software does, as well as the quat skin weights, which is called quaternion or DQ, double quaternion skinning, essentially it's called, that you'll find in most softwares. There's limitations to it as well. And let's take a look at some of those. So you'll see that it creates this soft sort of mess here. And anybody wants to be a TD, I'll teach you why that happens. But there's not a lot we can do just by sort of, running, the voxel skin weights. So we're going to have to get into painting weights. And the painting weights is down here at the bottom. There's also this skin weight utility, this tool, weight tool, and weight tool will actually help you out an enormous amount. So with the, in sub-object in here, we're going to go in and turn on select vertices, or right click and turn on select vertices here, okay? And you can do edge loops, but since you can only choose vertices in here, you can't choose anything else. You have to pick 2, and then you can say loop. Okay, so here's one way of messing with your skin weights. This is soft. You can see it going orange. Red is 100%. But if I were to take this and click on 1, it's now 100% affected here. So I can make sure these are also kind of 100% affected. And we want those ones in the middle here completely affected. And that's a very easy way to do it. Okay, this one here we could actually adjust a little bit differently. We want this starting to blend through the elbow, but maybe we want it a little bit tighter to the upper arm. So you have this scale weight or set weight. Set weight will set the weight to a given weight. It'll say 0.5. If there's another bone affecting those, it'll be 0.5 on both of them. Everything has to have a value of 1. Well, they're all combined bones, okay? So they have to be 100% affected by all bones combined that currently control it. You can see that there's all these bones in this list that currently control this down here. And notice how most of them have a 0 weight. The problem here is if I go and do something like set weight, we could actually end up in cases where we pass weights, or you blend weights. We're going to pass weights into these other bones, because these other bones are in what are called a bone list. They're on the list of things that could affect this. Well, we don't want spine joints, okay, or anything else, or the collarbone affecting down by the elbow. It should only be the upper and lower arm are the only ones that should be affecting this in this case. So really what we need to do is we need to cull them. We need to remove all of these. So if you go down to the advanced parameters, you'll see remove 0 weights. And I like to set that down to like 0.01. So I get rid of anything lower that or lower, and I'll say remove 0 weights. And you'll notice it's just down to these 2 now. Okay, so that is something you need to hit all the time, is remove 0 weights. Whenever we're doing weighting, just keep coming back and hit remove 0 weights in case things have been added into bone lists that shouldn't be there. Okay, so you'll see that's now, sort of gone around. Let's pick that one as well. And now let's actually try the scale weights. The scale weights will scale them up and down. Okay, so in this case, it's removing it down. There's just plus and minuses. So we can add a little bit of weight, or we could do the scale weights. And scale weights basically takes a curve out of the weights. If it's, you know, 0.1 on one of the vertices to the bone, it will only go up, scaled up a little bit. The one that's almost completely affected at 95% sort of thing will go up more. So it's scaling the weights, if you can imagine, right? So we can play with that, and we can sort of toughen that area up a bit. And again, maybe I'll go around this one and do a loop, and I could pull that one up a bit. Wrong bone to this bone. I'll pick that bone and then bring it up maybe to that one. You'll see it starts creating this hard break in the elbow. This is one of the issues with dealing with skin weights. It can be very difficult to get it to work the way you expect. You know, you can see that doing that, it might be too much, but I'm going to grab all these. Those should definitely be on the forearm. That should definitely be on the forearm. That should definitely be on the forearm. And in this case, we're not even dealing with twist bones, which is a whole other thing. And again, I don't want to get into fancy rigging at this point. So this one, we're going to loop around here, and I'm just going to scale the weights up a bit, make it sort of a little bit tighter. And you can see I'm getting a better elbow. Now, once we slide back, we should be able to mirror these over. This should be a mirrored rig. Everything's on center. You've modeled your character on center. It has a center line. When you look at it in the front viewport and look at it on the grid, it's on center. Left and right. When you look at it in the left viewport and go wireframe, you can't see the other side. It's okay. So we have a mirrored character going on here. So if we come over to the skin modifier again, mirror parameters, and turn on mirror mode, what we should see by default is a green and blue side. For some reason, it's not red and green, which would be port and starboard. But hey, you know, I'm a sailor. So blue is the left side of the character, green is the right side. Red are center ones that don't have a mirror one, right? They don't have a mirror one, they're down the middle. And you can see that in the bones and on the skin. Now it looks like we got some extra one here. I don't know what that is, to be honest with you. Let's find out what that is. Low boots. I must have added something by mistake. So I'm going to get rid of that and remove that because that should not be in there. I must have selected I think the boots by mistake. Yeah, I missed this bone over here in the foot. You can see it hasn't been added. So I'm just going to hide off the model, or actually leave the model on. Sorry, what am I doing? And go back to the rig. And I'm going to right click and let's say add bones and make sure I add that one into the list. And sure enough, there it is. So it looks like I'd clicked on the boot. So you can skin to another piece of geometry, believe it or not. Like, it doesn't matter what you skin to. So let's check that again in the mirror mode. Yes, everything's found its mirror side. There is this mirror threshold that if it's not finding the other side, you can turn that up, but you shouldn't have to. If you have to turn that up, it's going to start guessing more and more because it has no understanding of what a left hand and a right hand is. It just sees the vertices on the other side, and it could start finding multiple vertices. Now you've got a bunch of options here. Mirror paste will do the selections. So if you're selecting a group of vertices, okay, and you're picking vertices, you can mirror over those vertices. Or we can say paste green to blue bones. If we've moved bones on one side, which we're not going to bother doing, you can do that. We're not going to have to worry about it too much. But there is paste green to blue verts. So I'm going from the side I'm going to work on, which is over on this side, and I'm going to put them over on the other side. So if we look over on this side now, just turn off our mirror mode, we should see the same kind of weights that we see on the other side. And if we scrub into our animation, you're going to see that we're getting that nice harder, bend going on in here. So the other one we want to do, so that's the skin weights. The other one we want to do is down in this paint weights. And it's kind of funky because it's going to take some subtle changes to make it work. Turn off paint blend weights to start with and go to paint weights, and it gives you this brush. Control and shift is the size. We want to kind of a decent sized brush like that. You don't want something gigantic. We want the area that we're working on. And then you'll note the post sticking out of it, that long line sticking out of it is the weight. And we want that really low, 0.05. In fact, if you open up the tool, you can see it's listed here, and even 0.01 is a good weight. And I have tools on my website that allow you to pick those and whatnot uh, a bit better. So let's pull some more of this mesh with the upper arm bone here. And if I start to paint, you'll see that as I paint, it is pushing it in because this bone's rotated back. It's pushing it that way. Okay. If I go in, I'm just going to turn off the paint weight mode, go in and pick this bone, go back to paint weights and paint it again and just start touching it. You can see it's coming out. It's getting painted into this one. So I can add some more of the weights into the shoulder if I didn't want that collapsing as much, sort of thing. So I could really, really low amount of weight. And we want some nice even fall offs. Now, once we've got that, we can then, mirror it back to the other side again. Whoops, I managed to delete my skin or something. There we go. And that is with the mirror mode, but we want to go the other way this time, and you'll see an automatic update on this side. So if we go in and look, these weights should be the same. Now you'll also notice that we've got some craziness going on here with the clavicle on this side is affecting all the way over to this side of the body and all the way down into the to the chest area. This probably isn't what we want. What we really want to do is we want to have probably more of it affected by the bones that you'd expect it to be affecting. And that would be these up here. So it's getting the back, but you notice there's no red in there. So we might want to take over some of this chest area with some of the bones that are in that area. And if you remember, I mentioned in one of the classes when we're doing the setup that often having these nicely evened spine bones is really not the most effective way to rig a character like this. We don't tend to actually bend up here. So if you did this the way that I'd suggested in class and have a big bone here and smaller ones down in the waist, it's actually easier to skin too. Okay. So with this being said, we can go back to our paint weights. Okay, and I'm going to say paint weights, make my brush a bit bigger. I'm only going to worry about the one side because I can mirror it over, and I'm going to start painting some of the weights into this side of the mesh and making sure I don't touch anything else. Okay, and I'm going to start pulling the chest back into place. Okay, and you'll see it starting to turn more and more red. Okay, and I want some of that coming over. At any point in time, you can see what the effect is going to be on the other side. So you can see this is all stretched out, mirror, and I'm going to cast it over from the green to the blue side, and you'll see the other side pop into place now. Do that often so you can see what's happening, and you can see that it's become uneven in the middle here. See how it's really uneven down the center? So if I pick one of those verts, you can see there's all these vertices now. So all these different bones are sort of pulling on this, and the clavicles are still pulling on it as well. Well, I'm going to pick that middle one now, and I'm going to try paint blend weights. So back into our brush. Now, when you paint blend weights, you need a higher weight. You can up and down the weight of the brush right in the viewport using Shift and Alt as opposed to Shift and Control. So I'm going to take it up higher, maybe 0.5, 0.7, maybe a little bigger, and then I'm going to blend these weights. And you'll see it kind of trying to straighten them out, but we're only going to get so far with that with this bone picked. You may need to go to one of the other bones and try it. Now, this bone should probably have some effect on here first. Painting, blending here isn't going to have a lot of effect. Again, we go up to these clavicles. These clavicles have some outrageous different sort of solutions being pulled. If you notice, it's 0.2 on this center one, and the other clavicle on the other side is 0.1. So we might want to completely paint out these clavicles from down here. It really doesn't make sense that these are being affected this way. So let's go to our top spine. And let's turn off the paint blend weights, still in paint blend. And again, we want that nice, really low 0.01. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to paint some more in here and let this pull over on the top, sort of up more where it's supposed to be. and around underneath the arm and around the back. Could use a little bit higher weight value, 0.02 maybe, which is, double the amount of weight being painted. Sometimes you want really, really low. Sometimes, even, zero point 0.1 will get you what you want. But so I'm trying to paint out. You see, I'm not trying to touch the clavicle area as much, just sort of the top of the chest area here, above the breast, and pull those in. And again, I'm going to mirror that over, okay, and mirror it to the other side, see what I get, okay. And then, we could even go down and maybe pull this one in a little bit as well and add a little bit, or just maybe just add a bit more here. So I'm actually going to add a bit more here, a bit smaller brush, maybe a bit bigger again. Again, I'm using the hotkey for that. See what happens with that. It's not too bad. I might need a bit more down the middle. And that's not too bad. And then you can think about the clavicles here, what we're going to get with the clavicles. Do we need it, pulling that much right here? Maybe more of it should be on this center bone. And so I'm going to pick that center bone, and again, just go in and paint down that center line. Take over some of the weights from the clavicles we do this, so it's going to even it out a bit more, hopefully. Mirror it back over again, see what we get, and keep doing this back and forth for the problem areas. I could even adjust this one a bit, maybe pull some of, the bottom around more. Maybe this needs to be affected a bit more by the waist. You can see it's a little redder in the back and not as in the front. And yes, really low weight. Don't try and rush the process. It'll just end up a complete mess. So we can then still go and do some of those blend weights. Before you do any blend weights, I strongly suggest that you do remove zero weight. And again, I can explain it to the TDs as to why you want to do that. You'll suddenly notice that certain bones are no longer affecting certain areas when you do that. It's pulling those out. Anything 0.01 and down, it gets culled and removed. And then we could go about, let's just mirror those over. I think I was painting the other way, so we're going to mirror them that way. So remember, only paint on one side at a time, then mirror, then go back to the other side. And then you could do some blending of weights. And again, weight back up with Shift and Alt. And any sort of inconsistencies will try and be blended out. Now, if the paint blend weights seems to be causing you more problems than you want, it's very possible. And sometimes it's just really finicky that you have to work the way you need to sort of deal with it. The other thing is that sometimes it's because you haven't actually, like I'm getting this, see, it's pulling that one spot back over. If I go and pick one of these, you'll probably notice that some of these have collarbone effects in them, or other areas that are affected in them unevenly. And we need to go to the bone that first needs to get blended and try and blend that bone in. And again, it's causing grief just because of the way the weights are. It's going by what you're telling it to do, right? So maybe we'll try and blend it here. It looks like it might be blended on this bone better to begin with. And then we might be able to go back to the other bone. Sometimes it's a case, you can see this suddenly takes this right angle here. We'll go back, blend weight off, paint weights. We'll take the weight back to 0.01. Real small brush. Oops, I don't know what I just hit, but oh, I managed to hit high quality. Take my brush size way down, and then you can just sneak those back into place. And now one of the things is nice clean meshes when you model make it easier to skin. Okay, so again, the better everything looks, the better it is to be able to work on all this stuff. So another area you probably need to check are things like the head of the character. Well, right now the jaw is all getting mashed. Okay, so we can take it back to the base pose. just by sliding the timeline along. I'm going to go into the left viewport. I have select vertices on. I am selecting by, um, the marquee, the lasso selection. I can basically select the top of the head now where I expect it to, pretty much be 100% hard, and I can go and set those weights in there. Okay, I'm going to go in and cull weights. That means the neck and everything else won't affect it anymore, but I'm probably going to get a hard sort of ripping and tearing now at that point. You can see where it's really starting to rip and tear here. So the way I can fix that then is to go along to one of my poses, get at it maybe about there. And again, we're going to go back into paint weights or paint blend weights. And again, we want, nice low weight, 0.01. And we can just start, brushing some of that in. And then you could even use the paint blend weights to try and blend it into the other joints that are affecting it, making it smoother. So you can see I'm smoothing out that transition now. And again, back to mirror it over. And we should start getting that nice transition going on. Now, we don't have a jawbone. We don't this is a really limited rig. It's amazing actually how good this is done on the crotch area. Again, the knees might be soft. They need to be tweaking. Let's get those boots working and add those boots into it. So I'm going to copy the skin modifier. I'm going to go select the boots. Okay, it looks like I need to get rid of editable poly, and probably on this one too. I never collapsed mine. I forgot to do it. I should have done it first. I'm going to grab one of these at a time, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste instance on the skin modifier, and I'm going to paste instance on the skin modifier. And so that way now I can easily choose all of them and be able to skin them all together and work on them all together. So I can go into one and be able to skin them and work on these. Now, you'll see that the skinning has been kind of applied, and if we scrub it, there's all our animation, but there's obvious problems. So, we can start off by doing certain things. One, we want this to be all just locked onto the foot for now. I mean, really can't bend your toe in shoes like this anyway. So we want this locked in here. So I'm just going to, hit one on this, but we want to select all of them. So just hit grow. That's all of them. And now everything's on that. We're not even, this toe one will probably not even use. But you'll see that the foot obviously isn't working the way we expect it to to do at all. It's just not getting locked down here. So there's certain ones we're going to want. Back to the zero frame, left viewport. I'm going to grab the bottom of the foot probably, at least. And I want to make those weighted to 1. And oops, it looks like I grabbed the ones on the other side by mistake. Of course, I'm going to undo and deselect and go back and add those. And now I can go about doing some paint weights on these, and I'll probably turn up the the paint weight blend off. I'll probably just take it down to like 0.1, 0.2, somewhere in there, because I got to add a fair bit. You can see how jumpy it is when you're adding it at this level of weighting. But right now we need to add it in pretty strong, for this character. So I'm going to add that in. Get those to basically go all red, even some of those out. And then I'm going to start blending and, fixing this. So zero weights down. And let's start blending some of this. But first, actually, I'm going to go and take my weight down to 0.01. And I'm just going to take it up the ankle a little bit. And the reason being is paint blend weights works better if both bones already affect the vertices you want to blend. Hard to describe. Paint blend on, and now I'm going to blend these in. Again, I push the weight right up to the to full strength again, and I'm going to go in and just blend in the ankle there. And then I'm going to go in pick the leg bone, and I'm going to go ahead and blend it the opposite way, but you can see it suddenly jumps down. And the reason it did that is because these aren't in the weight. You can see they're not weighted by this bone. So my suggestion there again is we add them 0.01 and just paint in some weight. So it doesn't just suddenly, it has something to blend to is what it boils down to. So with the blend back on now, you see it no longer jumps. Okay, we can blend that on the foot. Um, but it needs to know what it's blending in and out of, or else it simply can't blend. Now, if we get a case like this, you can see that I've accidentally added some here. You can paint weights out by holding down Alt and it'll negative paint, but it isn't always the best thing to do for various reasons. But we won't get into that. I'm going to do a little bit of negative painting there. That's actually looking not too bad. Looks a little funky, but hey, we'll live with it. Knee needs to get fixed. And again, same thing. Let's go back into our mirror mode, mirror everything to the other side, and then see what it's actually done on the other side. And it looks like it's working pretty good. So what's our other poses look like? We, took it out here. How's the crotch look? We might have some ripping and tearing. It's actually surprisingly good. Um, how are those poses, and check all your other poses. And I want those poses there so I can scrub the timeline along and I'll be able to see how good a skinning job you did. But they need to be some nice big extreme ROM poses, right? Range of motion tests. And that will give you an idea of what's going on. So next we would have to get into looking at other parts of the model. So in this case, we have things like the chest piece on here, and I'll find that bodysuit and I'll unhide that. Now trying to get this to match, and it looks like it also has the unwrap still on it. Collapse that in. So this can be wrapped on now. This is really tight fitting. And so it's actually going to be pretty easy. But again, part of the modeling process is understanding. You'll notice Michelle has the edge loops really lined up to the underlying mesh. That's because if they aren't, and it fits tight like this, you're going to get the underneath mesh pushing through the outer mesh. And this is a good reason to actually not have any mesh, the body underneath your clothing at all. It's way easier to skin. Some cases you need it, other cases you don't want it there. Okay. In game characters, often it's all modeled in as one piece. You don't have this separation of pieces. Okay. So there's multiple ways around problems and multiple reasons why you've just got to live with it sometimes. Okay. So in this case, instead of trying to skin this and get it to fit to the body, we're going to do something called skin wrap. And I'm going to use skin wrap to get my skin started. So instead of skinning to bones, I'm going to wrap this mesh to this mesh. So I'm going to say wrap, add this one, right click to end, and you can see it's been added. And if I scrub now, guess what? The bodysuit just goes along with it automatically, and it's stretching along with the mesh. So it's now stretching along with the mesh. It's not too bad. Skin wrap isn't something that you always want to leave in the stack for various reasons, but because if we're going to actually use a turbo smooth on this model, it'll change the wrap settings. It isn't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes we want to do it, sometimes we don't. But we can convert this to a skin modifier. So if you roll down here, I should also show you some of the settings. If we actually go in and play with some of the settings here, you can see that we can change fall off settings, distance influence settings, and if we go into the sub objects, we can do it on a per vert basis. So we can look at each vert and the envelope that it's trying to be controlled by and start messing with those. That can get really difficult, real pain to try and control, by the way. It can be really difficult. So don't, my suggestion. Okay. Hopefully it works the way it works if we can do it this way. And then what we're going to do is we're going to skip down to the bottom of the down here and say convert to skin. So I'm going to take it back into the default pose, convert it to skin. You'll see it's turned off the skin wrap modifier, but left it here and added a skin modifier, added all the bones that were in the mesh that we skinned in the first place, because we wrapped to a skinned mesh. It could see that skinned mesh, and it took averages all the weighting. So now when you see it, it's actually skinned. So it's fully skinned. You could actually get rid of the skin wrap modifier. We don't need it anymore. It's been skinned into place. and it's functioning as it should. So you'll see that now it's skinned, and it's kind of okay. You can see what happens in his crotch now when you get into that. So, we could have done the boots that way, and it would have gotten us part of the way there. Now, they were already set up, not bad, so we're okay there. So, what about the gloves? Same thing. We can probably do that in this case because her gloves are very tight fitting. Um, and again, I'm just going to make sure that it is collapsed down to an edible poly with my UVs before I start the skinning process. Sorry, I don't want skin. I want the skin wrap. And we'll add that. And again, same thing. We're going to add this one. Right click to end. Check see what it's doing. Hey, it looks pretty good, except you can see the mesh is pushing out. From underneath, you can see it's having some, it's not doing really exactly what we want. Um, it's pushing through. They're so tight fitting, but this is one of those cases where it would be way easier just to delete the underlying mesh so that we don't have to deal with it. Okay, this is the perfect scenario for this where it's going to be difficult to do this. Another way to do it is put a transparent material on this part of the arm. So maybe in the animation, she needs to take her gloves off or something. We can reveal the arm through the transparency layer and whatnot. We can pull some tricks to make it all work. But you could also, again, go around and play with some of the settings and see if you can get it to sort of pull a little tighter and work a little bit better. So as I pulled up the fall off, that actually pulled it a bit tighter. Um, it should have done the same thing on the other side here. And again, we probably want to go in and convert this one and check and make sure that it's working. Now, if it's working, the other thing we could do is we could go in and paint weights on this again. It's a skin modifier, so we could go in and tweak the weights to do a better job if it's not doing a great job on this one. So I'm just going to delete um, the skin wrap. We don't need it. And away we go. With things like eyeballs and teeth and whatnot, we really don't need to skin them in this rig at all. So if I select all of these eyeballs, they need to follow the head 100%. So I'm going to unhide the rig. I'm going to take these eyeballs. I'm going to go to the select and link tool up here. Click and drag from the selected items now to the one I want to become the parent, and lo and behold, the eyeballs now follow along 100%. Same thing will happen with the mouth. You got to do it when it's all in place. So I'm going to click and drag from this one over, so the teeth, sorry, that all follows now. And then the fingernails are probably going to have to get skinned in, and we've got this crazy, mitt setup that's going on here. And so we can just go ahead, grab skin, drop it on there. We only need the end bone on each one. So I'm not copying it over. I'm just going to say add that one, add that one. And over here, I'm going to add this one and that one. And they just need to be 100%. So I wouldn't even bother with the fancy skin weighting and stuff. Back to our fingernails. Okay. So you can see this bone. I'm going to go ahead and pick the vertices, that one. I'm going to open up those bone tools, those weight tools, and I'm just going to make sure that says 100. I'm actually going to cull any zero weights as well. And then these, I'm just going to pick them. You can see there's weights here being picked up by something else. Forget that. Pick that bone. Pick this. 100% there. I can also turn off the envelopes so I'm not seeing them. And do the same thing on the other side. I'm not even going to bother trying to mirror them because it's so easy just to get it right by doing this. Pick them all, done. Okay, I'd do that for each finger if they were separate fingers. Those all work now. And we can go through our model and fixing bits and pieces. The next thing we want to look at is how to cheat in some other elements. So, we've got our character being able to deform here. And on this character, I don't want the wings and the feathers and whatnot. I just want this. But if you want to take a look at the hair, we can actually get the hair to sort of deform as well. But there are crazy ways of going to do that. And I've got a video on that I'm going to post you from last year. And it's kind of this neat cheat, that I use to get this to work. You could just try and sculpt it since it's an edible poly. You could just parent it up to the head head bone so it follows it if you wanted, you know, take it and it just does obviously some crazy things, and then go to the rib and freeform modeling tools and use the big sculpt brush. Of course, always take it off depth, put it on spherical, okay? And you could go about, you know, just sort of sculpting it up. Now, to make sure you don't totally screw it up and can't get back, what I'd do is that this is one of those cases where I'd use edit poly modifiers to do this, so that I could turn them on and off. And you might want to go about just sort of, you know, taking this and trying to mash the hair back in place. But I've got another way that I do it that's on this video, and you'll go, oh, that's kind of cool. Actually, it's an easier way of going about doing it. And this is an interesting thing. When you start doing this, you'll actually realize just how slow edit poly is compared to editable poly. Okay, it's much slower to deform a big mesh like this with a brush, and this is one of the reasons why I've also told you guys never to use the edit poly modifier when you can avoid it. But you can see it can become a problem. Really doing proper hair on the character is a much better solution, okay? But, you know, for your different poses, you can just turn on and off the edit polys. For that fact, you can even go in and rename them. So this is, you know, pose 1, right? And it's still an edit poly modifier, okay? So there you go. There is some options in a simple 50-minute video.